Welcome to this second webinar in the fall 2025 semester of the Silicon Web Customers Guild Presents webinar series. Today's webinar is Fun with Embroidery Machines with Jennifer Skwarski. A few words about the webinar series before we get started. The Silicon Web Customers Guild webinar series offers talks by speakers on a variety of topics about costumes and costuming. The webinars are free to Silicon Web members, and they may also be available to the greater costume community on a space available basis. If you have suggestions for future speakers or topics, please send them to board@siwcustomers.org with the subject line Webinar Series. The chapter acknowledges the International Costumers Guild Marty Gear Costuming Arts and Sciences Fund for a grant award in support of developing this webinar series, and the ICG for making its Zoom platform available to chapters and special interest groups. A few notes on Zoom. Please set or leave your video and audio controls on mute. Feel free to chat or react during the presentation. There will be a Q&A period after the presentation. To ask questions, type it into the chat window and optionally label it Q&A. When the webinar is over, please complete a brief survey on your experience. About the talk, customer Jennifer Skwarski will provide an introduction to computer-controlled home embroidery machines, including selecting one that's right for you, getting started with your machine, using existing patterns, and customizing your patterns. She'll also provide ideas for projects that are perfect for the holiday gift-giving season and suggest places to purchase patterns, software, and supplies. Jennifer has costumed for science fiction conventions since her second one in the mid-1980s. She's intrigued by different approaches and techniques to make things and how to combine those with science fiction and fantasy costuming. She strives for excellence in costuming and construction and always wants to improve her skills and expand her knowledge of making things. She did not start competing until 2012, but is glad she finally jumped into the pool. It has greatly improved her confidence and her ability to stand in front of people and not freak out. Jennifer is currently the president of the Silicon Web Customers Guild. So welcome, Jennifer, and please take it away.
Great, thank you, Phil. As Phil said in his intro, this is an introduction to machine embroidery. I myself have only had an embroidery machine since 2021, so I've got a couple years under my belt. I am still pretty much a newbie, but I hope I have assembled for you here a good introduction to see if you are interested in getting into this hobby. So on this first slide here, I rustled up a few examples of some pretty standard embroidery and also some more interesting things that you can do with it. So like going left to right here, this is a lovely Santa riding on a dragon. Who wouldn't love that? A design created by a company called Urban Threads, which makes a little more unusual designs. So that's a pretty standard, something you can embroider on a piece of fabric and use whichever way you'd like to. Going to the right there is a purse. Now this purse is made with a technique in which you pretty much make the whole thing in the embroidery machine, including putting the zipper in. I have not tried such a thing, but it looks really fascinating to me. Going one more over, we have a nice Halloween design there, made to go on a sweatshirt, made to, fit around the collar, it curves around. There are lots of designs which are made for specific applications like this on garments, on necklines, on collars, and on cuffs. And then finally on the far right, we have a simple folk floral border, which you can put on, well, whatever you want. Okay, let's start out with a very brief history of embroidery machines. And, I, did some research on this because I was wondering when the heck did this all start? And apparently in the very early 1800s is when they came up with a machine called the hand loom embroidery machine. Throughout the evolution through the 19th century, they went from hand-controlled machines to a pantograph to punch cards. And by mid 20th century, rather, they were going with paper tape. Finally, in the early 1980s is when we see the home machines come in. Of course, with the advent of the PC and the home computer, this made it far more accessible to the everyday person. Apparently, some of those early machines were still run with paper tape for their designs. But then, of course, things like floppy disk quickly took over. The machine that is pictured here is a Husqvarna Viking Designer 1. This was a very popular machine. My sister, in fact, bought one of these in 1998. I talked with her a little bit a couple of weeks ago about her machine and what kind of capabilities it had at the time. And I was very surprised that pretty much the same capabilities we have today, she also had at that time. Things have gotten more sophisticated, but, interestingly enough, a lot of the capabilities are the same. Here's a photo of one of those very old machines. This type of machine used from the mid-19th through the early 20th century. Apparently, at one point, there were tens of thousands of this type of embroidery machine that were being used around the world. Okay, so you're interested in getting into this hobby, and the first thing, of course, is which brand do you choose? All of the major sewing companies generally offer an embroidery capable machine. So your Singer, Viking, Bernina, Pfaff, Brother, Babylock, Janome, probably a few others. So what I have pictured here, of course, on the left is what you would expect from a home style machine. So this is a sewing machine with what is called an embroidery module. That is kind of the piece that's on the left side. And also you can see the hoop that is underneath the needle area. That is what we consider the typical home machine. Now, the machine on the right can also be a home machine. This is a multi-needle embroidery machine. These are mainly used for people who are more seriously into embroidery, who are doing higher volumes. So maybe people who are running small businesses out of their home that involve embroidery will get into possibly using a type of machine like this. It allows you to do a higher quantity at a higher speed. But the machines I'm mainly going to be talking about today are those ones on the left, your home machine, which the vast majority of time are embroidery machines and also regular sewing machines. So where do you start? Some things to consider when looking at machines and trying to choose. Brand loyalty, that's a big one. Do you already own a sewing machine brand that you like? Another option, which my sister brought up when I was talking with her about her experience with embroidery machines, is it good at embroidery and is it good at sewing? Is that something that is important for you to have both of those capabilities? She told me this was one of the major reasons why she decided to go with Viking, because it was a very good quality machine that would be good at both of these. And that is something that she needed. She did not want to have two separate machines. Hoop sizes that are available for your machine. Yes, there are a variety of hoops. All the manufacturers will make different sizes. The machine that I have is a slightly smaller machine, and it's a Bernina. And it does not take the full line of hoops that Bernina makes. It only takes some of them. So that is something you have to watch out for. You know, there are some machines out there which only take the smaller sized hoops. Yes, they are more affordable machines, but is that something that you want? You know, if you look and see it only offers a smaller, maybe you want to look at a different machine, something that has a wider variety of hoops available. File format for patterns. Now, a lot of these machines, they all have their own file format that they use. The pattern designers are all very good at offering a wide variety of formats. So if you go to purchase designs, they should have a listing of what formats that they sell. I have not run across anybody who has a very small list of formats. They all know they have, they really need to offer that full variety. So that really shouldn't be a problem, but that is something to watch out for. Another thing is software. Does the company that makes your machine, do they offer their own software? Does it come free with the machine, or is it something you have to purchase separately? What is the cost of that software? Now, software is not required to stitch, but if you do want to do more extensive types of customization, software is something you will need to be used. But you'll see from some of the things here today, you absolutely do not need to have software. I did purchase some software last year. So I went for like 3 years without having any specialized software. And I was perfectly capable of, doing a whole lot of embroidery. Another thing to look at for in a machine is how are patterns transferred. So most often than today, patterns are bought online. You'll buy from an online retailer, you download that file to your computer, and now you have to get it in your machine. So most of the machines these days, new ones, will have either a Wi-Fi or a flash drive that you can plug right into your sewing machine. That flash drive capability is something that my machine has. Sometimes also there is a cable hookup that you can do between your computer and the sewing machine. Now, I talked a little bit earlier about there being the machine and the separate embroidery module. If you are not necessarily ready to commit to embroidery, but you maybe still want a new sewing machine, oftentimes you can look and see which machines will take a module, and you can make that purchase separate at a later date. Although I will say that purchasing the two of them together will often give you a better deal. They'll have discounted prices, and watching out for discounted prices is a good thing. When I decided I wanted to buy a machine, I waited. I signed up for the emails and waited for the special price offer to come through, and decided that was the right price point for me, and then that's when I bought. Another thing to consider is, can you buy the machine from a local dealer, which is something I do highly recommend. Often those dealers will offer free classes, introductory classes. When I bought mine, I was able to take a class that introduced me to the regular sewing capabilities of the machine, and then a second class that was only the embroidery side of the machine. So that was very nice. My local dealer, which also happens to be a quilt supply shop, they'll offer other classes throughout the year. They have a club that you can join that is machine embroidery, and you can attend that and find out all sorts of other new tips and tricks and techniques. So that is also a good option to keep in mind. This is my baby. It is a Bernina 535. You can see that piece on the left-hand side is the embroidery module, and that unplugs from the machine. You can kind of see the hoop there attached under the needle area. I don't have any fabric in the hoop. I just had it sitting there for the photo. And this is a setup where when you are not using the embroidery capabilities and you just want to sew, you unplug that whole piece on the left side from the machine. The hoop is, of course, removable because you can interchange different sizes of hoops within the machine. So it's very easy to put in and remove from the machine whenever you need. Okay, so supplies. Now, a lot of these supplies will come with machines when you purchase them. But there's always, some extra things that are always nice to have. But some basic things, well, I talked a little bit, mentioning software earlier. Do you really need it? We'll think about that a little bit later. Stabilizer, yes, you do need to have a stabilizer underneath the fabric that you're stitching on. This is not the same as your regular sewing stabilizers. They have different types for different uses. Thread, embroidery thread only. Your machine brand rather should recommend a particular brand of thread. They may have their own brand of thread, but there are a lot of brands out there. Some of them are very reputable. Some of them may work really well with your machine. Some of them may not. I've heard both from various people. Sometimes might have to experiment a little bit. Needles. Yes, you will need different kind of needles. They're, standard sewing machine needles, but these are ones which are made for embroidery. A special embroidery foot. Now, this is definitely one of those things that should really come with your machine. And that's this kind of funky thing on the right here with the loop on the bottom and the big spring. That is the embroidery foot. What else do we have? Hoops, of course, I've mentioned a couple times. Here, kind of in the center, these are the two hoops that I own. This gridded thing here in the middle is a separate plastic piece that comes out. It is used for centering your design and, just making sure you have it in the correct placement. What else? Sewing plate. This is kind of an optional thing, but this is the piece that goes under your needle, basically. So probably looks kind of familiar. For my machine, I was told it was not really required exactly. And, the difference with this one is that it has one simple hole for the needle to go through. So you cannot do a big zigzag. This style is better for the machine and for doing embroidery because it has just the one single hole for the needle to go through. It won't suck your fabric through. What else? Spool holder. So that's this tall, skinny thing here. I have found after embroidering a couple things that this was something I really did want. It's a separate holder for your spool of embroidery thread. Which goes on the short spindle here, and then you hook the thread through the loop at the top, and then it goes over to your machine. So the spool holder I have sits right next to the machine and helps guide the thread in. I also have pictured here a couple different types of scissors, which are helpful. I did not own any specialized scissors initially. Last year, I did buy one specialized set, which is the top set here, very similar. And they're small curved scissors. These are good for just getting in there and snipping little threads, which is something you have to do every now and then. The pair of scissors below it is applique scissors. So possibly people who do quilting may be familiar with such scissors. Duckbill scissors is what they're also called. I have not bought a pair of these, but I may in the future after I've done a couple of recent stitches. That might be something I buy for myself soon. Spray adhesive is another thing that is quite useful. We will use that for attaching your stabilizer to your fabric. And it's a very light, temporary adhesive that allows you to, make sure you get that fabric and stabilizer together and ready to insert into the hoop. So, all right, so that is some basic supplies. To go more specifically into stabilizers, now there's a whole lot of types here. We have cutaway, we have tearaway, water soluble, topping stabilizer, which is very good and really, really needed if you're embroidering on something with piles. So like towels or fleece fabrics. Now, this is kind of a short list, but for basic types, this is a good list of basic types. You don't need everything. It just depends on what sort of embroidery you're going to do. I myself, I have, for most basic embroidery, I use a tearaway. So what this means is that once I am done embroidering, I can flip my design over to the back and just pull the stabilizer off. It just tears around the stitched pattern. Cutaway is, well, it cut away. It's tougher than the tearaway, so you actually have to go and cut it. While water soluble, obviously, when you're done, you put it in water and it disintegrates, which is really useful in some situations. I will use some of that later on, and you'll see how it was utilized. But like I said, you don't need everything. You just depends on what you get into. So, when I took my embroidery class for my machine, the tearaway was something that was initially recommended. So that's the first thing I bought. Now, when you're using your stabilizers in your pieces, and this was something I just ran across last year, which I thought was absolutely fantastic, is that cutaway and tearaway stabilizers can be removed or reused, sorry. Your design that you stitch out will only be so big, right? And your hoop is going to be much larger. And then the piece of stabilizer in your fabric, which goes into the hoop, have to be larger than the hoop. And in the end, there's often like a lot of stabilizer that really isn't used. You may have a piece that's like 6 inches by 2 inches or 4 inches by 3 inches, and it's not, you didn't use it, it wasn't stitched on. Well, I found out that you can use these pieces again. If you take multiple pieces and overlap them and glue, use a glue stick and glue them together, you can piece them together into a larger piece that's big enough to put back in your hoop. And that's what I did for one of my projects I did, because I was doing quite a bit of embroidery. And sometimes I would have like 5, 6 pieces of stabilizer that I had glued together and put it back in the hoop. And it worked beautifully. So I was really pleased to find that little fantastic tip. Okay. The second very important thing, of course, is thread. So most of the thread will come in spools, like showing here, varying sizes. Some of them, though, still you can get on something which looks very much like a regular sewing thread spool. But I would start with whichever brand that your machine brand recommends. If you choose to use something else, you need to experiment to see what works. Some of the very common brands are Sulky, Madeira, and Isocord. For example, I use Isocord. That's what Bernita recommends for their machines. I haven't tried any other brand out. I believe that my sister uses Sulky a lot with her Vikings, but she also may use Madeira. But I've heard from other people and read online lots of instances of, well, I tried this brand and my machine just didn't like it. So I need to use something else. Those are thread tips. Okay, now onto the software. So like I mentioned before, you do not need to have software to embroider. But if you want to modify any of your designs significantly, then software will help you do that in a much easier manner. I also talked about the fact that your machine brand may make their own software. A lot of them do. Some of these software, there might be some that comes free with your machine or is very affordable to purchase. There are a lot, though, that are really have high capabilities and are very expensive. I did not buy the Bernina software because it just wasn't in my price point at all. It was very expensive software, even though they have a couple of different capabilities for them, depending on which level of software capability you want. It was still not something that I wanted to purchase. So an option is this third-party software. So I'm sure there are more, but I know that there are at least two here in Brilliance and Hatch by Wilcom, which are two very highly regarded third-party softwares. They do also come in several price points. So depending on, if you just want to have software that does some minor modifications, you can get something that is very affordable, all the way up to far more sophisticated software that allows you to even do your own designing. Both of these are a purchase and not a subscription, although I do believe Hatch does offer a version that is by subscription. So I know that is something that a lot of people don't like about a lot of software these days, is that they're all subscriptions. But these two at least are something that where you can just outright purchase it. Both of them also have free trials. Now they are, obviously they have some, limited functionality to them, but there's still a free trial. I own the Embrilliant software. That's what I decided to go with. And I, yes, did the free trial with it. And, it's good to look at it to see, does it make sense to you the way it works? Because I know everybody's brain works a little bit differently, and it depends on how things are laid out. Does it make sense of where you find things, how you go in and modify things? Does it work for your brain? I'm a firm believer of that is a big thing for people. Just as a note, the Hatch software is a hobby level software by Wilcom, who are the original developers of embroidery software. So, back in 70s and 80s, when they first developed software for computers, that's who did it, is this company, Wilcom. So in final, yes, they're both highly regarded. Look at them both to see what fits your needs and if that's something you really, really want. These two by no means are the only third parties out there. There's probably more. Those were just a couple that I picked that I was aware of and that I knew were well regarded. And this is not to say that the software that the machine brands use isn't good. A lot of it is. It just depends on what you want and what you want to pay for. Okay, so this kind of brings into custom designs. This is something you can do with that software. You can, do this yourself. It is probably more complicated than you think it is. It really isn't as simple as just importing a JPEG and poof, there's a design. So yes, you do need that specialized software to do it. It is something that I feel anyway that you probably need more training to do. So whether that's the software helping you do it or taking more classes to discover, you'll see a little later on in this talk when I show some photos of an actual stitch out, how it's probably more complicated than you think. The layers that are involved in doing machine embroidery. I was rather kind of surprised when I did my first two, like, what is this machine doing? It's stitching this line in this spot. Why is it stitching it there? Well, it needs to layer up some of that stitching. However, if you're not really wanting to jump into that, there are retail design sites that do custom designs. So, these retail design sites, which are anywhere from larger companies to, somebody who sits at home behind their own computer doing designs. You can contact them and, ask for a quote to do a design for you. I did that not long actually after I got my machine. I wanted to do a special pattern for my husband, and it was a very unique thing that needed a custom design. And so I contacted somebody, they took a look at it and said, okay, this is, gave me a quote on it, and, I paid them and they delivered me a very fine product in the end. You can test things out. If you're wondering about quality from some of these sites, if they have any free designs, you can take a look at those. You can download them, stitch them out yourself, see if you like their quality of work. Okay. However, even if you don't do custom designing, you can customize your designs. All machines have certain capabilities. They can do things like change colors, do resize on patterns within reason. You can mirror, rotate, duplicate, move things around, add text. You can add various separate designs together to make something new. Here on the upper right side, this is from a pattern retailer. They sell patch shapes. Only 5 showing here, but this pack, which is called a design pack, actually includes like 22 or 25 different shapes. And they're all kind of standard shapes and, well, a few unusual ones for making patches. And so what you would do is you would combine one of these outline shapes with a design that you have, another separate design that you have that would then be placed in the center. And you can combine those two right in your machine and have it stitch out. So here at the bottom is a fine example of something I combined, and I will take you through how I did this step by step. So then these are, yes, screenshots right from the front of my machine. So apologize if some of them are a little grainy or blurry, but I started off with this fine spiderweb design. And as you can see circled in red here on the right is a plus thing for a layer. So that is how I, on my machine, can add additional designs. So let's go on to the next one. So I decided I want to add a little googly spider. So you can see now the spider is sitting here in layer 2. And it just, the machine just sort of brings the design, and I believe it just centers it. So it just kind of plops it right on top of whatever you had there already, which may not be optimal. So I decided that I wanted to go in and move that spider to a better place. So I have some options here for manipulating the design. So this 4-way cross here is a move function. This curved arrow, of course, is a rotate. I can also do mirroring. I can change the dimensions and things like that. So I took my spider and I decided to move him down. So I do this on my machine via a knob, a physical knob on the front of the machine. And I just scooted him down so he was below the web. All right. So next I decided, well, I want to add some lettering. My machine does come with some built-in lettering, just a couple of alphabets, but I chose a nice scripty one. And I typed in my name. And there it is. It just spit it out. And of course, like it did with the spider, it just plopped it in the middle. So again, I took it and I moved it up to the top, this time above the spider web. Okay, so this looks really pretty good, but it's very black and white. So maybe I want to add a little color. So you can see over here on the right-hand side, there's this little color palette. So that's where I go to change colors. Right there, circled. Okay, so I can go in. My machine knows the color numbers for a variety of thread manufacturers. So I just make sure that it is on whichever manufacturer of thread that I'm using, and I can literally punch in the color number and it will find me that thread. So there we go. I chose one that I happen to have already, nice kind of orangey. And there, now my name is changed to an orangey hue. So that is that so far, but I decided, well, what else can I do with this? And one of the additional things I can do within the machine is bend the lettering. So here we go. So here is a function. You can kind of see over on the top right here that ABC over an arc. And then I have controls of how I can bend it up or down. So I decided to have it follow the angle of the spider web a little better. And there is my final design, 3 layers, but it will, I put the fabric in the hoop and put the hoop in the machine, and it will stitch all of these out at once. It will do it layer by layer. So as the layers here on the right-hand side are numbered 1, 2, and well, you can't see 3 on there. I would have to hit the up arrow to see the 3. It will do those each layer separately, but it's in one hooping. You don't have to take anything off. And it just goes like that. All right, so that is a kind of a basic outline of how we really within your machine, without even, it's no use of software or anything, you can do some modifications to your designs. Okay, so let's stitch something. So I decided that I was going to try a couple of things that I had never, ever tried before. And the first one is going to be patches. So my sister, who has been doing machine embroidery for a fair bit longer than I have, for my birthday last year, made me a couple of unique patches. And she's like, you really got to give it a try. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so I decided this would be a very good opportunity to try out patches. Patches are what are called an in the hoop pattern. So in the hoop things are this kind of weird magic. I've been really kind of fascinated by the whole thing. There's a lot of manipulating what you're putting into your hoop and at which stage. So there are times when, and you'll see it in here as I go through this patch thing, where you may be layering up fabric to stitch on. And you may stitch and then put in some new fabric and then stitch some more, and you may have to trim something. And anyway, so this is a way they come up with doing things like bags and toys and other home decor, where you're doing a lot of the project right there in the machine. And like I said, it's something that I've just started looking into, and it's really so fascinating. So on the left here is the patch pattern loaded into my machine. So this is, I found this and thought it was just so hysterical. It is, the element of surprise, element number 122. Very simple design, square, one color. The place I purchased it from on the right-hand side here is just a screenshot of the directory on my computer. This place, when they sell you a design, gives you all of the formats. So a lot of places will only allow you to download whatever, like one format. So whatever your machine takes, you buy that file for it. This particular company does things differently. And when you buy a pattern, you get the whole run of formats. So for example, my machine uses the one that's second from the top, .exp. That's for Bernina. My sister would use the one below that, .hus, S for Husqvarna. And there's, like you said, a wide variety of formats here. Some of them are for Brother, Singer, and, I'm not even sure what else some of the other formats are for. And then also, we've got some other files in here that they'll often, in my opinion, it's only a really good pattern seller if they give you things like instructions. So like the techniques we're going to use for this patch are a little different. So they have a full how-to document that takes you step by step on what to do, which is really, really nice. Okay, so let's do some stitching. For patches, we are doing things a little bit different. The first thing is hooping your stabilizer, but right now we do not add any fabric in it. So this would kind of makes this really kind of fascinating. Stabilizer only for the first step. Most patterns will recommend that you use two so that and place them 90 degrees to each other for a little bit better stability. So there I have my two pieces of stabilizer hooped together, and I'm going to put it just like that in my machine. So the first step for a patch is something they call a die line. And it stitches, and you're stitching just on the stabilizer. It's a square shape to the patch, so obviously you only stitched square. That was it. And the second step is to take, the machine, of course, stops between steps, thankfully. I actually take the hoop out of the machine, which may sound kind of frightening, but really it's okay. The machine is really good. It's not going to move. It's not going to do anything. I take that hoop out and add a piece of my twill, which will be my fabric the patch is made out of, on top of it. And then I stuck it back in the machine. Now you can see the fabric isn't even in the hoop. I could have had the option to put a little temporary spray on the back of the fabric and then press it into the hoop on top of the stabilizer to just help it stick. But I didn't even do that for this. Really wasn't needed. And I put it back in the machine, and then it stitched the second step, which you can see it's a zigzag all the way around. And on to the third step, which is to take the hoop out again and trim that fabric, that twill fabric I used. Now you can see the stabilizer is still in there. You do not cut through the stabilizer. That's one of the key things, is that while you're stitching, if you need to remove your hoop for whatever reason from your machine, you've stopped the machine, it's not stitching, for whatever reason you need to remove the hoop, you can do that. Do not remove the fabric from the hoop, because that's where you get in trouble. Do not remove anything from the hoop. So for this patch, my second step was to trim the fabric close to the stitching all the way around. Leave the stabilizer all intact, put it back in the machine, and then we start stitching the rest of the pattern. So on the left here, you can see this is a very good example of those supporting stitches. And it goes through, and it went around like, I don't know, 2-3 times, all the way around that perimeter, doing zigzag, basically, offset from each other. So it gives a nice base for that satin stitch that goes all the way around the edge. And even when it started to stitch the letters, which are also in a satin stitch, you can see there's support underneath those. This is what makes, embroidery design patterns more complicated than you think they are. And so we got basically 4 steps here, and finally at the end, we're all done. In this third one here at the top, you can see I've circled in green some like little threads that are hanging out. You can also see it between the letter A's and H. There's a little thread there. You can see a few of other ones. These are called jump threads. And that's when just, the machine has finished stitching in one area and then simply picks up and goes to start in the next area. A lot of machines will have a capability to like trim those as they're going along, and you can turn them on and off. I know I've occasionally had that function on my machine. Currently have it off. What does it mean? After you're done, you have to go through and trim all those away so everything looks neat and more finished. This fourth photo here at the bottom right shows the patch. I've cut it out from the stabilizer. You cut it, trim it really close to your stitching, being careful, of course, not to trim any threads. And there you have your end product. And that was just really sort of cool and absolutely not terribly complicated, really. And you've made something really unique. And I was just fascinated by the whole process. And yes, I will probably be making more patches in the future. Okay. On to something else that I tried new, something called freestanding lace. This is also something which they call in the hoop, like we did the patches. These designs are more dense as far as thread goes. They're more intricate. You do not use any sort of fabric in these, for the most part. There are some situations where you may use some fabric. But you can see in a lot of these designs, there is no fabric involved. So in the end, you can make interesting things. This white piece on black here, this is a bookmark. It's not done on black fabric, just that white is your end result. That is your end piece. On the left, far left here is obviously a lovely 3D gift box. How did they do that? How did they do the 3D bit? These are all separate pieces. They're all stitched out separately, and then you put them together. They have these little, like a loop and knob that gets stitched. So a knob on one side and a corresponding loop on the other, and you just kind of button them together. There's a lot of fascinating things to make with this sort of technique. You can make small candle lanterns, of course, like LED candles. Light up houses. Just, really, really kind of amazing things. Third from the left here, obviously, we have jewelry. The cute, cute pair of earrings. You can also make bracelets and necklace pendants. Really, really neat. On the far left here is, this is an example of something that does use fabric. I want to make this so bad. It's so cute, this 3D rocket. This is a freestanding lace, but it is something that also incorporates applique. So it uses a lot of felt within the pattern. And these are all separate pieces. You stitch them out separately and you put them together. When you purchase a pattern like this, it comes with the instructions on what to do. They don't want you to just be flailing about with something like this. A lot of the places will allow you to download and look at their instruction sheets so you know what you're getting into. So I have looked at this instruction sheet for the rocket a couple of times and haven't quite gotten my nerve up to buy it yet. But it is something I definitely want to do. So yeah, so there's a really fascinating variety of things you can make with freestanding lace. Here's one that I tried out. I'm going to make a small design. This is a design that came with my machine. Most machines will come with a small selection of preloaded designs for you, obviously, so you can get started using your machine right away. As I mentioned, there is no fabric used in this at all. It is only stabilizer. I have hooped my stabilizer again, just like I did with the patch. In this time, I am using something that is water soluble, which is very important to use with a stitch like this. Okay, so here is the design I chose, and it is a small key. You can see a little tiny loop at the top, which means that you can thread a ribbon through it and it becomes a little ornament or maybe a pendant for a necklace. It definitely has like a steampunk vibe to it. So one of the important things when you're doing this freestanding lace, because you don't use any fabric at all, is that you have to use the same color thread in your bobbin as with your top thread. Now, most everybody who sews, is thinking, well, okay, I do that when I sew pretty much. My bobbin is always the same. For machine embroidery, a lot of times people will use either a black bobbin or a white bobbin thread. There really isn't a whole lot of like using a colored bobbin thread because it's embroidery and you really don't see the back. So that is the kind of an odd thing to get used to. But when you are doing freestanding lace, you do need to use the same exact thread, which may mean in a multicolored pattern that you have to, spin up a couple bobbins worth of thread. Okay, on to the next step. So I put my stabilized hoop into my machine. Here's a good shot of the foot. It's got that nice loop on it and a spring, and that sucker just stitches all by itself. This is also the kind of the interesting thing, if you're not used to it, about machine embroidery is that you're not using the foot pedal like you do with normal sewing to stitch. You are pushing a button and the machine goes by itself. And it can really go at a frightening speed. Yeah. Now it does do, and this is part of the whole pattern and software thing, is that, when it comes to areas that it's stitching where it needs to slow down, it will do that and do more intricate areas a little bit slower. But for a very basic stitch, the machine can really take off at a scary speed. I had to tone the speed of mine down a little bit because it got a little too fast for me. But here it is for this freestanding lace key. You could see the stitch is fairly intricate, and it needs to be because we're going to get rid of most of that stabilizer there. Okay, so here is the end result. On the front on the left there, the back in the center, which also looks very good as compared to the front. And then the final thing, which I've looped a little bit of ribbon through and will probably hang on my Christmas tree or something. But what I did as far as the stabilizer goes is I just trimmed it with scissors pretty close to the edge of the design all the way around. And then I just placed it in some water for not very long, 15 seconds or something. I mean, just enough for it to have the stabilizer that was on the outside edges, that was outside of the stitch area, dissolve away. I could have left it in longer to really dissolve all of the stabilizer, but I wanted a little bit left in there so that when it dried, the piece stiffened. So there may be some of you who may be familiar with crochet techniques where you may crochet something very lacy and like I know at Christmas time, I've seen patterns of you can crochet a three-dimensional angel, for example, out of crochet thread. And then you do a technique using a starch and whatnot over a form, and then you make that normally not stable design, which is rather floppy, into something that is more stable. So that is why I pretty much left a lot of the stabilizer in here. When it dried, it's still pliable, but it is nice and firm and will keep its shape and everything. And it is just a cute little piece. Okay, so what all else can you do? Well, there are probably a lot of things. Basic items that you're familiar with, such as for the kitchen, dish towels, pot holders, napkins. A lot of these things are things where you can make the item entirely yourself, or you can buy things that are called blanks. So you can buy a dish towel, a finished dish towel, and embroider on it. Or you can make your own pot holder. My sister-in-law also does machine embroidery, and she will make her own pot holders, the whole thing, from start to finish, out of pieces of cotton and layering with the batting inside and doing the embroidery on the pieces. Bags are something also, very similar. You can buy blank tote bags. So that's probably something you can buy at, a local store, or you can specialize, order specialty things to make them, or you can make them all entirely yourself. So things like wallets and pouches, though, those get a little more into those in the hoop projects, like I mentioned, where you can even do things like putting zippers in, all within the embroidery pattern. This small bag here with the floral folk design on the right-hand side, that is one of those patterns where this is pretty much all done in embroidery hoop. I haven't delved into this. It's like I said, this is one of those fascinating things to me. I'm really intrigued. I might check out some patterns to see, how you do that kind of stuff. Some other things, pillow covers, that makes sense. I mentioned jewelry already. Greeting cards here at the top in the center. Those are Christmas cards that you can stitch on paper. According to the woman who runs the embroidery club at my local shop, you can stitch on balsa wood, which, yeah, I found that really fascinating. What other things? Coasters, mug rugs, which is another name for a coaster. There's some lovely, intricately designed ones here at kind of center bottom. Quilting, if you quilt. Here on the upper right, this is a quilt pattern for doing the actual quilting on your quilt. So, lovely designs that can be worked in to your quilting. Mug wraps, so those things that go around your paper cup of coffee to keep it warm. Those are very popular. Plushies, look at these adorable stuffed things. So many of these that a lot of people design. They're all very, very cute. What else have we got? Bookmarks, as I, showed you in the freestanding lace, or you can do other styles of bookmarks. Those 3D decorative items like the box or the candle lanterns, things like this. Buttonholes are something I discovered recently. Fascinating. Here you can see on this shirt cuff, old flower design, and it's a buttonhole built right into the center of it. That is amazing, I found. Absolutely incredible. More common things, like you can make or purchase shirts and put things on those. My sister made a shirt for me years ago when she started out with machine embroidery. She just purchased the shirt and added the designs to it. Came out really nice. Baseball style hats are also very popular. Aprons. That's another thing my sister did for me once. I have this really cute customized apron with a dragon on it that she made for me. But she bought the apron and then just put the design on. Notebook covers. Those are something that a lot of the design places make as well. Luggage tags. You can see this one here. Really cute. Another fascinating one, tiled seams. So this headless horseman here, this piece is in the end is something like 25 by 30 inches. So obviously this is not something that you can fit in a machine. But if you look closely at it, you can see these very fine grid lines on it. And this is made of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 tall by 4 wide, separate square pieces. And you stitch them out separately and then sew them together. Assemble as like you would a quilt, basically. And then you have this finished design. I've seen ones of like bookshelves. You can stitch out a cute set of bookshelves and you can like interchange which pieces of books you want on them, depending on, which ones you stitch and in what order. Really, really fascinating things. Okay, so this is all really wonderful then, but we all know these are machines and there's always some kind of problem you come up with. So I know that my machine is really pretty good when it senses that something is wrong and it will just stop, refuses to go anymore, tells you that something is wrong, but of course it doesn't specifically tell you what is wrong because it has no idea. One of the very common things that happens is something that's called bird nesting. It's when thread tangles in a bunch on the underside of the project. Why does this happen? And there's a whole list here of things. I found when I was doing a large embroidery project that oftentimes you just need to go down the line to try and figure out what is the issue. It could be your needle. You may need a new needle. The one you have may be wear out. Or are you really kind of stitching with the wrong size of needle? So that may be a thing. Did you change the bobbin recently? If you did, it may not have been threaded back in correctly. Or if you've been stitching for a while, there may be some loose threads that have gotten down into the bobbin case. Has it been a while since you cleaned it out? You might need to clean it out, and that's probably why it's messing up. When was the last time you oiled that machine? Because when you're doing embroidery, these machines run fast and they're stitching a lot in a very short time. Last year, I had a project and I was stitching, I would say, an average of an hour a day for like 4 weeks. And I was oiling my machine every day, basically, because it really kind of needed it. Is your machine, is it threaded correctly? Is another thing. Did you change colors recently? It might have been that you didn't quite get the thread threaded into the tension discs right. Another issue might be the stitch density might not be quite right for the design that you're stitching. So if you've made some modifications to your design, like you've made it bigger or you've made it smaller, a lot of machines will only recommend that you change the size of your pattern by about 20% max, either smaller or larger. If you do more than that, then you run into issues with your stitch density either being too high or too small. And this, can result in stitch problems and your machine just completely stopping and telling you that there's some sort of issue that you need to address right now. Okay, so what are the some things that I have done? Here's a couple. Your very basic tea towel there on the left with a nice little herb design. This design I picked was an actual set of designs that has same thing with variety of herbs. That is often for a lot of the retailers. You can buy a design, yes, but a lot of them will sell design packs, and they are things that are all related to one another. Gives you a little bit better deal and will give you a whole set of patterns to use. On the right here is a ruffle of the dress. This was the big project I mentioned last year. Approximately 130 bubbles on the ruffle of this dress. Yes, this took like about a month to do. I learned a lot doing this, and what the finicky things about my machine were and what things I could really get away with. So that was a really good learning experience for me. Here's another costume thing that I did just to add a little bit of interest to it. There's the hem and collar of this tunic. I decided to make it something a little more interesting. Found a couple of patterns that coordinated well with each other and just added it to it. And I was very happy with that design. Okay, what are some of the resources you have? Well, I've been mentioning designs which you can buy from a wide variety of sellers. Here's just a few of the bigger ones. Urban Threads, I kind of mentioned at the beginning. They do a lot of designs which are a bit different, a little more offbeat. Some of them were really, really beautiful. Like, that was that Santa riding the dragon. So, where else would you get a Santa riding a dragon? They have a lot of more interesting ones. Embroidery Library is their parent, Urban Threads parent company, and they sell more, what I would say, quote, normal embroidery designs, but a large variety of them. OESD, which stands for Oklahoma Embroidery something. I don't entirely remember. This company does work closely with Bernina to create designs and sell designs and supplies as well. They have a wide variety of things to choose from. Embroiderydesigns.com. It sells designs from a lot of different designers. So they're not necessarily designing on their own, but they resell others. Embroidery.com is also the same way. Another big website. And then you can also find places like Etsy. A lot of independent designers are selling their designs there. You may ask, well, how do I know if they're good? Well, some of it might be just a bit of try and see, take a chance. Although I'm sure a lot of them are really very good. Okay, so that's designs and about supplies. Your stabilizers, your thread, your needles, where can you go? I highly recommend, if you have a local shop you can go to, that you patronize them. It supports them. They're often independent run shops. I've got one just 3 miles down from my house. They've been a really good resource. And, if I'm having some sort of issue or if I need some sort of advice on something, not just embroidery, but anything, I've used them in the past. Questions on just general sewing, they've always been very helpful. As I already mentioned in the design, OESD also sells supplies as well. Amazon, I know my sister gets some of her stabilizer from Amazon. Embroidery Store, these couple next ones, Embroidery Store and All Stitch Machine Embroidery Supplies, these two do not sell any designs at all. They are strictly supplies. So your stabilizers, your thread, your scissors, anything else that you could need for embroidery, those are two big stores. And if you don't have a local shop, there are some of the brick and mortar quilt shops that do sell online. I certainly have come across a lot of them. They're also really good for videos because I cannot learn everything from, one class that you might take, at your local shop. There are so many online resources, stores, designers, whatever online who have YouTube channels that can go through and show you techniques. We were talking about software earlier. One of the third-party softwares is Embrilliance, which is the brand that I have. And they have all kinds of videos. And I remember looking recently at some of their videos, trying to kind of learn a little bit more about a particular technique. How can I make these changes that I want to change? And I was watching a video and I found all kinds of capabilities that I didn't know the software could do. Like, wow, you can do that? It really was kind of amazed me. So, online resources for how-to videos are absolutely amazing, but nothing quite beats if you're able to just go down to a store and ask someone a question. That is really, really a wonderful resource to also use. And that concludes the instructional part of this video. So I will open up to any questions you might have.
We have quite a few questions that are in the participants list.
Okay.
So, do current machines, I'm assuming yours is fairly current, but this is a question from the O'Connors. Do current machines come with contracts that prevent service or software updates if you sell them to somebody else?
Oh, that is a good question. And I really don't know. I will have to admit that, yeah, that is something that you would probably have to check into the, terms and conditions, for each, for whichever brand that you're looking at. If you have a dealer for that brand, near you, that might be somebody good to ask. Did you have something additional, Patrick?
Uh, yes, my daughter, when Sue Edmonds died, my daughter was sort of willed her embroidery machine when Sue died, and she inherited it, but she couldn't find all of the keys and things that made it possible for her to do everything with the software that was there. And whether to update it, she doesn't know how to do that. She
Right.
would be here right now, but the dog she had for 13 years just died,
Oh,
and she's out. She can't get her head into coming on
yeah,
board today. Anyway,
yeah, yeah,
the,
yeah.
yeah, and the right to repair laws is a question about things like you can't even replace the battery in your cell phone when it wears out. You can replace a battery in a remote for a television, but not a cell phone. Why?
Mhm.
You know, and
Right.
there's laws getting enacted in Illinois at any rate for something like that.
Well, I mean, that's definitely something to investigate, because I know there are a lot of people who have a machine, maybe it's a few years old and, they got itchy fingers and they want to go, they want to get the newer thing. And so they prefer to sell their old machine and buy a newer one. And well, someone's got to buy that older machine. So I would say that's a fairly common practice of machines changing hands. So I would definitely try and see, like I said, the first step I would take would to see if you can contact a dealer and ask them what they know, because they'll probably be able to tell you a little bit more of, if it's possible to go, and get those keys or whatever that you need to get the functionality of the machine back up. They would know what would need to be done.
Okay, so Husqvarna or whoever, Viking, she'd need to contact somebody there.
Right, or find a Viking dealer near you.
Mhm.
Yeah, and ask them, because they
Yeah,
often, if I had a question like that.
those are getting thinner on the ground right now.
Right,
Thanks,
right.
Joanne going away and so on, all that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I know my dealer down the road that I have is, they deal Viking and also Bernina. So, if I had a question like that, I would definitely go to them and talk, see what they know, see if they can help out or direct you in the direct direction.
Okay, the second thing is more of a comment. If you're living in the East Bay in California, there is apparently a Dublin sewing center in Dublin, California that has machines and supplies that she recommends. That's Kimberly Lilquist. We have a question of whether you've ever had to upgrade or install the software or firmware on your machine.
I
When
have
was that?
actually, and I did do it just recently. Um, I received an email from Bernina saying that, there was a firmware upgrade for my machine. They gave me full instructions on how to download it and load it onto a flash drive, and then plug that flash drive into the machine and what to do to get it to upgrade. Um, and it all went completely smooth. And I had absolutely no problems with it. It all worked really well for me. In that case, they provided thorough instructions.
Okay, next question. Have you ever worked with metallic thread, and is there anything special you have to do with that?
Yes. I have tried once working with metallic thread. On that dress that I showed you with the bubbles on it, I had, in the middle of stitching, I said, well, it might be really cool if some of these had a little bit of metallic thread on it. And so I decided to swap that metallic thread in and try it for a little bit. And I was not successful. As I understand, metallic thread can be finicky. And what would I do in the future if I wanted to try this again is I would look up some more resources online for using metallic thread. Is there do I have to watch what kind of needle I'm using? That's probably a big one. Actually, might be the needle. What other things do I have to be aware of to be successful with that metallic? Because yes, as in my experience and from what I understand, the metallic threads can be finicky. Heck, I know from doing hand cross stitch with metallic threads. That can be really finicky even, and that's hand. So yeah, it is possible, and I've seen a lot of people do some really spectacular things with the metallics, but it is something you have to experiment with.
Do you have a favorite design supplier?
Probably that Urban Threads, just because they do designs that are more unusual. So if you want to find like steampunk designs, if you want, regular punk designs, frankly, they have that. Just a lot of quirky, unusual things, and some things that are really extraordinarily beautiful as far as the design itself and the colors chosen for the designs. Really, really nice stuff.
Oh, Kimberly comments, and maybe this is to do with the urban threads. Not the urban threads, the metallic threads. She said you have to turn down the speed of the machine to about 300.
Okay, I could see that too,
Makes
definitely.
sense. And keep
Yeah.
the thread behind the machine.
That could be a thing. I don't know. Like I said, I haven't gone and done more experimenting with it. I could definitely see that. And slowing it down, yeah, I could definitely see that too as well being an issue.
Question about the process of changing colors. Does that happen only once per color, or do you have to swap the same color in and out?
It might. You may have to swap colors and even the same color in and out. When I was doing those bubbles, for example, it was, I think, a total of 5 different colors, but I had, I think, 8 thread changes. So it all depends on how the pattern layers. And it will you'll have to switch colors depending on layer. So you may initially start with a white, and 3 color changes later, you use white again because that second batch of white had to be on top of the pink that you stitched previously. So, yes, you can, it won't necessarily stitch all of one color at the same time. It depends on the design.
Can a larger design be made by moving the fabric / stabilizer around inside the hoop?
I believe so. But I think that's a really specialty thing. That is not something I have really investigated. But I know there's something called continuous hoop. And I believe it is related to that sort of thing. And I unfortunately don't know a lot about it, but all I can say is it may be possible that you can do something like that, and it just depends.
Yeah, I was thinking in that instance, like if you wanted to put trim around the hem of a garment, for example.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So like I said, it can be possible to do things like that. And there are ways that you can kind of finagle some of that too. With knowing exactly, when you put your fabric in a hoop and put that hoop in the machine, it will generally want to start in a certain place. And you can move, it will center, it will want to start often it will want to start um, the design in the center. But it will center the design at any rate when you put the hoop in. But if you don't want it centered, you can shift it around all you want. I did that a lot when I was doing those bubbles, because I would use my largest hoop, and a lot of the bubbles were individual, but some of them were in small sets of 2 or 3 bubbles together. And I would try to do as many as I could in one hooping. So that would often mean, okay, I'm gonna, do bubble number 1, but I needed to be at the bottom of the hoop. So I would simply, while in the machine, move it to start that design in a different spot, as opposed to in the center of the hoop where it defaults to. So that is something that also could be useful when trying to do something like a continuous piece of trim on a hem.
Well, that is all the questions that I have right now. Does anybody else have one out there in the audience that they didn't put into the chat?
Well, Jen, thanks so much for giving this talk. It was a really impressive talk, and I learned a lot from it. So thank you so much for doing that.
You are welcome. And thank you everybody else for coming.
So I wanted to talk about upcoming and past webinars. Announcements of upcoming webinars are emailed to Silicon Web and ICG members. They're posted as events and notices on Facebook, and they're also published in the Silicon Web's Virtual Customer magazine. Information on upcoming webinars also appears on the calendar page of the Silicon Web Customers Guild website. Recordings of past webinars are available on the webinars page. And information on joining the Silicon Web Customers Guild is available on the Join Us page. If you're an ICG member of another chapter, you can always join another chapter as well. So please consider doing that if you're so inclined. So thank you very much. This is the last scheduled webinar of this semester, but please stay tuned for announcements of webinars that will be available in the spring 2026 semester.